I never thought the end of my world would arrive in the middle of a Monday meeting. My life was built on schedules, balance sheets, and boardroom deals, not sudden collapses. Yet there I was, 53 years old, standing at the head of the conference table with charts in hand, when my chest locked up like a fist squeezing my heart. At first, I thought it was just fatigue. I had been running on 3 hours of sleep, preparing a merger proposal that would double the size of my company. The numbers were swimming in my head, and I brushed the pain aside, determined not to look weak in front of my executives. But then my vision blurred. I remember gripping the edge of the table, feeling the polished oak under my fingertips, before everything tilted sideways. The last thing I saw was my nephew, Dante, rising quickly from his chair. His face was pale, but there was something else in his eyes, something I couldn't name in that moment. Then darkness swallowed me. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. My name is Cassius. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned my nose. A nurse explained that I had suffered a heart attack. If I hadn't been rushed in by my staff, I might not have survived. The words barely sank in. Heart attack. At 53. I had always believed I was indestructible. I ate little, slept less, and worked like a machine. My company, Spencer Dynamics, was my creation, my child. I built it from a single office with a rented desk into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. But now, lying there with wires attached to my chest, I realized how fragile everything really was. During those first few days, I thought mostly of my late brother. He had been gone for years, leaving behind only Dante, his son. Out of obligation, and maybe a bit of guilt, I had taken Dante under my wing. I gave him a place at my company, mentored him, taught him the rhythms of business. He was smart, no doubt about it, but he had a hunger in him that I didn't always trust. Still, when he visited me in the hospital, bringing flowers and forced smiles, I felt a surge of gratitude. He told me not to worry, that he would handle things at the office until I recovered. At the time, those words sounded like comfort. Weeks passed. My body slowly healed, but the nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the empire I had left unattended. A business is like a living thing. It needs direction, discipline, vision. Without me, what was happening? I asked the nurses for newspapers, but the financial pages only confused me. I saw my company's name mentioned in small print here and there, but nothing alarming. My doctors warned me against stress. They told me to focus on recovery, not business. But business was my life. Without it, I was just a tired old man with scars in his chest. The day I was discharged, I stepped out of the hospital with shaking legs but renewed determination. I promised myself I would not waste another hour. I would return, reclaim my seat at the head of the table, and lead again. The driver opened the car door, and as the city skyline came into view, my heart raced, not with pain, but anticipation. My empire was waiting, or so I thought. When I arrived at the company headquarters, something was wrong. The security guard at the entrance, someone I had known for years, hesitated before greeting me. His smile was forced, his eyes nervous. He let me through, but the unease in his face stayed with me as I walked into the lobby. Inside, everything looked different. My company had always carried my mark. The framed photographs of our early milestones, the strict dress code, the sense of discipline. Now there were modern art pieces on the walls, employees dressed more casually, and whispers that followed me down the hall. I pushed into the boardroom, expecting a warm welcome. Instead, I found my nephew, Dante, seated at the head of the table, my seat. The executives surrounded him, papers spread before them. Their eyes darted to me with discomfort, as if I had walked into a stranger's house uninvited. "Uncle," Dante said smoothly, rising to his feet. "You should be resting. What are you doing here?" The room went silent. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I understood the expression I had seen on his face the day I collapsed. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. I forced myself to stay calm. "This is my company," I said, my voice steady. "And I've come back to take my place." Dante exchanged glances with the executives, then gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Uncle, things have changed. While you were recovering, the board agreed it was best for me to assume control. We couldn't risk instability. The papers are signed. I am now acting CEO." The words slammed into me harder than the heart attack. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You what?" "It's all legal," he said quickly. "Temporary at first, but then permanent. You taught me to seize opportunities. I did what had to be done." The room blurred again, but this time not from illness. Rage and betrayal burned through me. My own blood, my brother's son, had taken everything while I lay in a hospital bed fighting for my life. I wanted to shout, to tear the papers from his smug hands, to remind everyone in that room who built this empire. But something in me shifted. My doctors had warned me, stress could kill me. And looking at Dante so certain, so full of himself, I realized something. I stood frozen in the boardroom, my breath heavy, my chest still sore from the weeks of recovery. The men and women around the table avoided my eyes, as if they were ashamed. Yet none of them spoke up for me. Not one. That silence was louder than Dante's words. He gestured politely toward the chair at the far end of the table. "Not my chair, the one reserved for visitors, for those without power. Please, Uncle, sit. We were just finishing up some matters. You'll be interested, I'm sure." My legs moved without permission, and I lowered myself into the empty chair. The leather felt cold beneath me. I had spent decades at the head of this very table, making decisions that shaped hundreds of lives. And now, I was being treated like a guest in my own house. I studied Dante as he resumed his place of power. He wore a tailored navy suit, expensive and precise, the kind I once wore when I wanted to intimidate rivals. His voice carried a calm authority as he spoke about quarterly projections and new ventures. But beneath his polished words, I heard something else, ambition unchecked. The executives nodded eagerly. They had chosen their side. When the meeting ended, I approached Dante. My voice was low but firm. "You've stolen from me." He smiled, almost pitying me. "Uncle, you don't see it yet. I've saved the company." Investors were nervous. They needed new blood, a steady hand. "You were gone for months. We couldn't wait." I stepped in. "This was never yours to take," I said. "It's ours now," he corrected. "The world doesn't stand still because you're in a hospital bed. Adapt or be left behind." He walked out of the room, leaving me with my fury. That night, I returned to my penthouse overlooking the city. For years, the view had been my reminder of victory. The skyscrapers glittering like jewels, the streets alive with energy. But now it mocked me. My empire was no longer mine. My nephew, whom I had raised like a son, had claimed it. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. I sat in the dark, staring at the skyline, my mind replaying every mistake. I had trusted him. I had given him everything, knowledge, opportunity, power, and he had repaid me with betrayal. But anger alone would not win this war. I needed strategy. The next morning, I met with the only person I believed I could still trust, Raphael, my longtime attorney. He had been with me since the early years, when Spencer Dynamics was nothing but a rented desk and a dream. His loyalty had never wavered. We sat in his office, the smell of coffee strong between us. "Tell me the truth," I demanded. "What has he done?" Raphael sighed, removing his glasses. "While you were in the hospital, Dante convinced the board to sign emergency authority over to him. It began as a temporary measure, but he moved quickly. He restructured shares, consolidated support, and now, legally, he controls the company." My stomach tightened. "So it's over?" "Not over," Raphael said, "but difficult. He's clever. He's surrounded himself with people who benefit from his rise. Taking it back won't be easy." I leaned forward, my hands clenched. "I don't care how difficult it is. That company is my life. He thinks I'm finished, but I have one move left. I just don't know what it is yet. Raphael studied me carefully. Cassius, you must be careful. Your health. Forget my health, I snapped. What good is living if I let him take everything I built? The following weeks were a blur of quiet observation. I returned to the office in small doses, walking the halls like a ghost. Employees greeted me politely, but their eyes betrayed uncertainty. They weren't sure whether to see me as their founder or just a relic of the past. I watched Dante with cold eyes. He was everywhere, shaking hands with investors, giving speeches to staff, unveiling new projects. He had the charisma I once possessed, and he knew how to wield it. To the world, he was the future. But I noticed the cracks. He moved too fast, announcing expansions before securing funding. He took risks that smelled of arrogance. He promised more than he could deliver. And in those cracks, I began to see my path. One afternoon, I walked into what used to be my private office. The door was unlocked, the room stripped bare. My leather chair was gone, my desk replaced with something modern and soulless. The photographs of milestones, the first contract, the ribbon-cutting ceremony, my late brother's picture, all vanished. I stood in the empty space, my chest aching, not from illness but from grief. That room had been the heart of my empire, and now it was nothing but walls. But then, I felt something unexpected. Not despair. Resolve. He could erase my name from the office. He could take the chair, the desk, the photographs. But he could not erase me. The company's roots were mine, and without me, he was building on sand. I whispered into the emptiness. Enjoy your throne, Dante. It won't last. That evening, I sat again with Raphael. I see his weakness, I told him. He's reckless. He wants to expand too fast, chase glory. If I let him run unchecked, he'll destroy the company himself. But I can't wait. I need to act before the damage is irreversible. Raphael raised an eyebrow. And what do you propose? I looked out the window at the city lights. I'll build something he doesn't expect. Something outside his control. If he thinks I'm beaten, let him. The final move isn't made at the beginning of the game. It's made when the opponent believes they've already won. Raphael leaned back slowly. You're planning a countermove. Not planning, I said. Executing. From this moment forward. That night, for the first time since my heart attack, I felt alive again. My body was weak, but my mind was sharp. I began sketching out names, contacts, possibilities. Old allies I could call upon. Clients who still owed me loyalty. Projects that Dante didn't know existed. If he had stolen my company while I lay in a hospital bed, then I would destroy his kingdom while he sat on my throne. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be easy. But it would be final. The first rule of war is knowing which battles to fight in the open and which to fight in the shadows. Dante thought the war was over because he held the title of CEO, but titles don't guarantee loyalty. People follow strength, vision, and the promise of survival. That was where I still had an advantage. I began with the clients. Over the years, I had built relationships not just through contracts, but through trust. Many of them had my personal number saved in their phones. Late-night calls, last-minute rescues, favors exchanged quietly. These things bound us tighter than any signature on paper. One evening, I called an old partner, a logistics magnate named Victor. His voice cracked with surprise when he heard me. Cassius, I thought you were still recovering. I am, I admitted. But I need to ask you something. How has Dante handled our account? There was a pause. Then a sigh. He's ambitious. Talks big. But he doesn't listen. He wants results faster than possible. My people don't trust him the way they trusted you. That was what I needed to hear. I leaned back, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. Victor, I may not hold the same position anymore, but if you stay close to me, I promise you'll never regret it. He didn't hesitate. You have my loyalty, Cassius. One by one, I made those calls. Quiet conversations. Careful promises. Seeds planted in the dark. But building an army required more than allies outside the walls. I needed eyes inside the fortress Dante now commanded. For that, I turned to someone I never expected to trust again, Elaine, my former chief financial officer. Years ago, we parted on bad terms after a heated dispute over expansion. She had left the company, bitter and angry, and I had assumed we'd never speak again. Yet when I reached out, she agreed to meet me in a quiet cafe on the edge of the city. She arrived in a plain coat, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp as ever. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Why did you call me, Cassius?" I studied her face. "Because I need someone who understands numbers better than anyone else. Someone who can see the cracks Dante is making before they break the foundation." She narrowed her eyes. "You think I'll help you after how we ended?" "Yes," I said honestly. "Because you love the company as much as I do. And you know what happens if someone like Dante runs it unchecked. He'll burn it to the ground for his own glory." Her silence stretched long. Then finally she spoke. "You're right. He's already making risky moves. I've been watching from a distance. His projections are fantasy. His debt acquisitions are dangerous." I felt a surge of satisfaction. "Then you'll help me?" She smirked. "Don't think I'm doing this for you. I'm doing it because I refuse to watch everything we built collapse. But yes, I'll help." And with that, I had my spy. The days turned into weeks, and Dante's confidence only grew. He strutted through the office like a king, announcing bold initiatives, hosting glamorous events, courting the press with polished speeches. The world saw a visionary. But behind the curtain, Elaine fed me numbers. He was bleeding money faster than he could secure it. His expansions into foreign markets were unstable. His promises to investors were impossible to meet. The storm was forming. Yet I knew I couldn't simply wait for him to fail. Failure alone might destroy the company I loved. I had to guide the collapse carefully, steering the wreckage to fall on him, not on the foundation I intended to reclaim. One night, I met Raphael again. He studied the documents Elaine had provided, his face grim. "He's digging a grave with these numbers. If this continues, the company will collapse within a year." "Then I'll stop him before that happens," I said. Raphael looked at me over his glasses. "And how do you plan to do that?" I tapped the table slowly. "By showing the board what he truly is. Not through anger, not through speeches. Through proof. They followed him because they feared instability. But if they see he's leading them toward ruin, they'll turn back to me." Raphael nodded, though his expression was cautious. "And if they don't?" I clenched my fists. "Then I'll build something new from the ashes. But either way, Dante doesn't win." The hardest part was hiding my intentions from him. Every time I crossed paths with Dante at the office, he treated me like a retired relic, smiling politely, asking about my health in front of others. I forced myself to smile back, to nod as though I accepted his dominance. But one afternoon, he cornered me in the lobby. His tone was colder than before. "Uncle, I hear you've been speaking with old contacts. Stirring waters that don't belong to you anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't test me. I respect what you built, but this is my company now. If you keep meddling, I'll make sure you regret it." For a brief moment, I saw the mask drop. His eyes weren't calm and confident. They were sharp, almost desperate. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't as secure as he wanted the world to believe. I leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "You should be careful, Dante. Thrones built on stolen crowns rarely last long." His jaw tightened. He turned away without another word. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights glowing outside my window. I thought of my brother, Dante's father. He had been a flawed man, but never cruel. I wondered what he would think of his son now. Would he blame me for raising Dante in my shadow, for teaching him ambition without teaching him loyalty? The thought weighed heavy on my chest. But grief would not serve me now. Only resolve would. I poured myself tea instead of whiskey, the warmth grounding me. Then I spread out my notes across the table. Elaine's numbers. Raphael's legal advice. The promises I had gathered from loyal clients. Piece by piece, the countermove began to take shape. Not a loud strike. Not a desperate gamble. But a quiet, careful trap. The trap had to be invisible until it was too late. Dante was arrogant, but not blind. If he sensed the ground shifting beneath him, he would double down, or worse, he'd cut me off completely, freezing me out of the company before I could strike. So I moved with patience. Each step was small, quiet, almost invisible. Elaine fed me monthly reports, numbers Dante presented to the board with polished confidence. On the surface, they looked solid, even impressive. But Elaine showed me what lay beneath. Debts hidden under temporary financing, projections inflated by imaginary revenue streams, and partnerships that looked stronger on paper than they were in reality. It was a house of cards. Beautiful but fragile. One Thursday morning, I attended a board meeting as a guest. Dante insisted I sit at the far end again, but I didn't mind. The further I sat, the more I could watch him perform. He strode into the room with the confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. His voice was smooth as he laid out plans for an ambitious international expansion. Within 6 months, he declared, Spencer Dynamics will have branches in Dubai, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. Our reach will double. Our influence will be unstoppable. The board members clapped politely, but I saw hesitation in their eyes. They remembered how I ran things, with caution, with long-term stability. Dante's vision was dazzling, but unstable. When the meeting ended, I approached one of the quieter board members, an older man named Howard who had been with me since the early years. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at his tie. "Do you believe him?" I asked softly. Howard glanced around, then lowered his voice. "He's persuasive, but something doesn't feel right. His numbers are too neat, too perfect. Trust that instinct," I told him. "Perfection is a lie. Look closer." His eyes met mine, searching. He gave a small nod. That was all I needed. Doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, I strengthened my alliances outside. Victor introduced me to 2 other partners who had grown wary of Dante's promises. I met them quietly in restaurants, in parked cars, even once in a dimly lit warehouse where Victor's trucks were loaded for shipment. Every conversation carried the same theme. Dante was overpromising, under-delivering, and burning bridges. One client leaned across the table, his voice low. "Cassius, I don't care whose name is on the office door. I care about stability. And if you can guarantee that, I'll stand by you." I shook his hand firmly. "When the time comes, I'll need you to speak. Loudly. Can you do that?" He grinned. "With pleasure." But even as my web grew stronger, I could feel the weight of my own body holding me back. The heart attack had left scars inside and out. Some nights I lay awake, sweating, my chest tight, wondering if I was foolish to fight this war. Maybe Dante was right. Maybe my time had passed. Then I would picture my brother's face. I would remember the long nights I spent building Spencer Dynamics from nothing, eating cheap meals in my office while I pored over contracts. I had bled for that company. It wasn't just a business, it was my legacy. And legacy was worth any risk. The breakthrough came sooner than I expected. Elaine called one evening, her voice urgent. "Cassius, you need to see this. Dante has been covering up a failed deal with a European supplier. He told the board it's finalized, but I have proof the supplier pulled out weeks ago. If this gets exposed, his credibility shatters." My pulse quickened. "Send me everything." She hesitated. "Are you sure? This could bring him down, yes, but it could drag the company down with him." "I'll make sure it doesn't," I promised. "Just trust me." When I opened the files she sent, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. This was the crack I had been waiting for. I met with Raphael the next morning, sliding the documents across his desk. He read them slowly, then looked up at me with raised brows. "This is damning," he said. "If the board sees this, they'll have no choice but to question him." "That's the plan," I said. "But it has to be more than a whisper. It has to hit them like a hammer. I need a moment where they can't ignore it." Raphael leaned back. "And you think you can time that moment?" I nodded. "He's announcing his global expansion to investors next month. The board will be there. The press will be there. If I reveal this then, his empire collapses in one night. Raphael's lips curved into a slow smile. You really do plan to destroy him. I met his gaze firmly. He destroyed himself. I'm just making sure the world sees it. The weeks leading up to that day were some of the hardest of my life. Dante sensed something was off. He watched me more closely, his smiles tighter, his words sharper. Once, he even confronted me in the hallway. You're waiting for me to slip, he said, his eyes narrowed. I kept my face calm. You don't need my help for that. For a moment, rage flashed in his eyes. But then he laughed, clapping me on the shoulder as if it were all a joke. He walked away, but I could feel his suspicion burning in the air behind him. I knew then, this wouldn't just be about documents and numbers. When the trap closed, it would be personal. The night before the investor meeting, I barely slept. I sat by the window, the city lights blurring in my tired eyes, the files stacked neatly on the table beside me. My heart ached with the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just business. It was blood. It was betrayal. It was the boy I had once held on my knee, teaching him chess, telling him that patience won games. Now that boy was a man who had stolen my throne. I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence. Tomorrow it ends. The next morning, I dressed in the same dark suit I had worn the day the company first went public. It was tighter now, my body weaker, but the fabric carried memory, power, and purpose. As I walked into the investor hall, the chatter quieted. Some recognized me, whispering to each other. Dante was already at the front, his smile bright, his voice smooth as he prepared to unveil his grand vision. Cameras were set up at the back, journalists whispering among themselves as Dante prepared to step into the spotlight. He loved the attention. I could see it in the way he adjusted his tie, in the way his smile widened when the lights turned toward him. I sat in the back row, my briefcase resting by my side. My hands were steady, though my heart thumped heavily in my chest. I told myself it was not weakness, not illness, just the sound of war drums. Dante took the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we reveal the future of Spencer Dynamics. We are no longer a national leader, we are global. Dubai, Singapore, Sao Paulo, the world will know our name. Applause filled the room. Investors leaned forward, excitement gleaming in their eyes. The board members sat at the front, nodding dutifully. To them, Dante was a visionary. To me, he was a gambler bluffing with a weak hand. I let him talk. I let him dazzle. He boasted about partnerships, about contracts, about markets waiting to be conquered. And then, when the room was at its peak of belief, I stood. The movement was small, but it cut through the air. Heads turned. Whispers rose. Dante paused mid-sentence, his smile faltering for the first time. "Uncle," he said, his voice amplified across the hall. "Is there something you'd like to add?" I picked up my briefcase, carried it to the front, and placed it on the table before the board. My voice was calm, but it carried. Yes, there is something the board, and every investor in this room, deserves to know. I opened the briefcase and laid out the documents Elaine had gathered. Pages filled with emails, canceled contracts, financial statements. Proof of the European supplier who had walked away. Proof of debts hidden under clever disguises. Proof that Dante's empire was smoke and mirrors. "Dante has lied to you," I said, my voice rising with each word. "These expansions he promises are built on foundations that do not exist. The European partnership he claims is finalized, canceled weeks ago. The numbers he presents, fabricated. He is gambling with your money, your trust, your future." Gasps filled the room. Board members leaned forward, grabbing the documents with trembling hands. Journalists began scribbling furiously. Investors whispered in alarm. Dante's face drained of color. He tried to laugh, to wave it off. "This is desperation. My uncle is clinging to relevance. He doesn't understand modern business." I cut him off. "I understand lies when I see them." I pointed to the documents. "These are not my opinions. They are facts. Confirm them if you doubt me. Call the suppliers. Check the accounts. You will see the truth." The room erupted into chaos. Investors demanded answers, their voices sharp. The board members exchanged panicked looks. Journalists pushed closer, cameras flashing. Dante's mask cracked. I saw the boy beneath the suit, the same boy who once begged me for a chance, who had promised he'd make me proud. But now his eyes were wild, his confidence shattered. He slammed his fist on the podium. "This is sabotage. He wants to destroy everything because he can't accept change. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. No, Dante. You destroyed yourself. I only pulled back the curtain. Within minutes, the board called an emergency recess. Investors stormed out, some shouting, some silent with anger. Journalists swarmed the hallway, hungry for statements. I stood back, letting the storm rage. For once, I didn't need to fight. It was fighting itself. Finally, Howard, the quiet board member, approached me. His hands shook as he adjusted his glasses. Cassius, is all this true? Yes, I said simply. And you know it. You felt it in your gut. You've known for weeks something was wrong. Now you have the proof. He nodded slowly, his expression heavy. The board will not forgive him for this. The company, it may not survive untouched. But perhaps with steady hands, it can recover. He looked at me meaningfully. The implication was clear. Hours later, the board reconvened in private. Dante tried to defend himself, but the evidence was undeniable. The contracts were checked, the numbers confirmed. His empire collapsed in the very room where he had boasted of greatness. The vote was swift. Dante was removed as CEO. His title stripped, his authority gone. When the decision was announced, he turned to me with eyes full of fury. You think you've won, Uncle? You've humiliated me in front of the world. You've destroyed me. I met his gaze calmly. No, Dante. You destroyed yourself when you chose greed over loyalty. I only ensured you didn't take the company down with you. For a moment, he looked as if he might strike me. But then his shoulders slumped. Without his crown, he was no king, just a man who had gambled and lost. He walked out of the room, his steps unsteady. That night, I returned to my penthouse. The city stretched out before me, lights glowing like stars fallen to earth. I poured myself tea, my hands finally steady. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had destroyed the usurper. But victory carried a strange taste, bitter and sweet. I thought of my brother again. I wondered if he would have hated me for breaking his son, or thanked me for saving the company. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. But one truth was clear. My empire was mine again. Weeks passed. The board reinstated me as acting chairman until a permanent structure could be arranged. Investors slowly returned, reassured by my steady hand. The company limped, but it survived. And survival was enough for now. As for Dante, I heard whispers. He tried to start his own firm, but few would touch him after the scandal. He had burned his bridges, and the ashes followed him wherever he went. I never saw him again. One evening, standing by the window, I placed my hand against the glass. The city pulsed with life below, and I felt a strange calm. This war had nearly killed me, not with bullets, but with betrayal. Yet here I stood, still breathing, still fighting. I whispered into the night, not for Dante, not for the board, but for myself. Legacy is not given. It is defended, and mine will endure. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.